Good morning, folks. Welcome to Senior Exhibition 2018. Thank you all for coming and supporting Mackenzie and the process. So this is Mackenzie Miller, and this is her Senior X. She has 15 to 20 minutes to tell us about her project. At the 15-minute mark, I'll go like this and let you know, and you have that amount of time to wrap it up. There will be plenty of time. The panel can ask you questions right when we're done. Sometimes panel members, if you feel like you haven't seen what you want to see according to one of these criteria, it's a really good time. Sometimes we can get to it just by asking a pointed question, and then you can get what you need. And if there's time, there'll be a little bit of time for the audience to ask questions. And once that happens, then we will dismiss everybody except the panel members, and then we will deliberate and come to consensus on whether Mackenzie met the standards for this project. So.
Am I good?
All good?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Is the timer started?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you everyone for coming. My project focused on student activism. So back in 2016, when President Trump was elected, I began to be, very concerned with what was happening in our country. When I saw different rights being threatened, I started getting involved in politics and working and getting informed on the government and what was happening. And I also worked on getting involved in the community. And so when I started this project, I wanted to do something that involved this. My prior knowledge with this, once the election happened, I joined a few clubs. So those groups included the Formidable Women's Coalition, which is a group of local women who organized after the election to mitigate any negative comments from the current administration. And then I went to the Women's March, and there I learned about indivisible MDI on the trip down. And so once I came back from that, I kind of joined, and I've been going to meetings when I can. And the Women's March was really inspirational and empowering to me, and inspired me to get more involved with activism. So I wanted to focus on this on my project, and I knew that from the beginning. I was just trying to find out what. And then the Parkland shooting happened, and so it was really difficult for me, as well as my peers, to kind of sit back and watch our fellow students, have this happen to them again. And we knew we had to do something, and we couldn't not do something. So one of my friends, his name's Dawson Burnett, sent a text to me and a couple other people and said we should organize a demonstration, because we were supposed to have our first scheduled lockdown the day after the shooting. And that ended up being canceled because of the shooting, but we still continued with our demonstration. And we had signs that said enough is enough, and we're sick of watching this happen, and just kind of gave our political opinions to what was happening. And after that, we wanted to continue with activism. And so I organized a group of about 100 students, and we were called MDIHS Resistance. And I decided to make this group my senior project. And so I developed my essential question, which is, can I engage more students in activism and also become a better activist and leader myself? So a lot of people ask me why activism is important and why feel it's necessary to get involved with activism. And so and the reasons I think that is because it gives power back to the people once you're involved with activism. We live in a country where it's a democracy. It's a government by the people, for the people. So the people's opinion is definitely important and definitely should be heard. And the reason I thought it was good for students to get involved is because it's good to hear from the upcoming generation of voters on what they want, because the policies that are being made right now directly affect us as well. So once I had my question and my project idea, I went to Bo Green and I asked her, because I knew she was a member of Indivisible, and I asked her who she thought could be a good mentor for me. And she recommended Gail Lizer, who's been really great in helping me with all the work that I've needed and all the questions. And so She's a member of the Indivisible MDI Steering Committee, so basically she plans, activist events and keeps a group of people informed on what's happening politically, and just works to get people fired up and active in politics. And so that's what she helped me do with my group. She gave me different tips on events that we could do, and gave me contact numbers for senators and different people I can call to get permits for different things. So she was really great all around with everything I needed. So what happened during this whole process? So first there was the Parkland shooting, our first protest. There's a picture of that there. And so, after we did that first protest, we started getting contacted by a lot of news agencies, and not just us here on MDI, but people all across the nation. So some national events were planned. That's the national walkout, where we went outside and stood outside for 17 minutes to kind of honor the victims of gun violence, and especially the Parkland kids, and also voice our opinions on what was happening. And then there was also the March for Our Lives event that we went down to in Boston. And then after those two events, we started doing weekly meetings. So since March, we've been meeting weekly to discuss what's happening in the news and our place in it, and kind of what we want to do in response to different tragedies. We've also been attending school safety forums where we've talked about how we can make our schools safer in regards to this issue. One of the ideas at that meeting that was recommended by one of the students in this group was to start an anonymous tip line. So we've been really pushing to get that going, and that was finally started yesterday with the app and all set up. So that was really great to see. And the last thing that we've really been focusing on is voter registration. So the civil rights team here at the school holds a voter registration drive every year, but there were a lot of us who really got involved with that to make sure that it was great, and we were able to ask 100% of eligible voters if they want to register to vote. So here are some pictures of kind of what we did. There's a picture of the Parkland students the night of the event and our response to it the next day. That afternoon, it's the same day as this picture here, we met and we did kind of a more public showing, and we had news agencies come and speak with us about our feelings, and they interviewed us. And so after that, our lockdown because it was canceled the first time, got rescheduled. So our next demonstration, we wore red armbands to stand in solidarity and show that we're still fighting for this, and we want to continue the conversation about gun control. Then that picture in the middle is of the walkout. So the signs there read, "Protect kids, not guns." And we had about 200 students in the school participate in that, so that was awesome. Over there is the picture of the march. So there were about 40 of us. I organized and led a trip down on a bus to go to Boston, and we marched and kind of called on politicians and said our concerns in a more public big venue. And so that was really inspiring and empowering for all of us to go, and it motivated us to continue with our activism. This picture down here is a picture of one of the sign making parties we had. We had 2 sign making parties throughout this whole event. One was for the march, and then one was for the walkout. And so that was really cool because we were also able to work with middle school students for those. So we met at Bar Harbor Congregational Church, and we were able to get them involved as well. So it was cool to kind of get a larger age range involved with those 2 events. That picture in the bottom is a group of community members and Indivisible MDI members, and also me and another student named Irene Choi, who were personally invited to go and meet with Angus King. And so that was really cool because not only were we able to voice our concerns directly to him, but we were acknowledged for everything that we had done in the past couple months. So that was awesome. And then that last picture is of the Mother's March that was created by Indivisible MDI. And that focused on topics such as climate change and racism. And so it was fun for some of us in the crowd to go and experience that and get involved in community events. So what went well? Really, like everything that could, happen went pretty well throughout this whole process. We had a lot of support from students, teachers, community members. It was really awesome to have the news like amplifying our message throughout this whole process. And so this video that I'm about to show you is a mix of our first event where we lined up the hallways with our signs and our trip down and like different students' responses to being involved with activism on the way down to the march. So I'll play that. I don't know.
There's something happening here. There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there. Telling me.
Remember the students were not only killed in Florida, but everywhere.
I'm going down to Boston to represent my generation, the rights of my generation to out-of-state school environment.
They have had enough of turning on the news and seeing that more children in schools have died. I am marching for the safety of students and teachers. I have two reasons. One's in 4th grade, the other's in 9th grade.
Our nation's children are in danger, and our lawmakers aren't willing to make a change without us here making a statement.
Baby, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on.
I always wanted to be, but this is the first one I'm actually participating in because of you.
I mean, I've always thought like an activist, I guess, but I haven't done much of the action part.
Yes, but I never really was like in any marches or anything like that.
I feel like I was always someone who wanted change, but I never fully understood it, and being a part of this has given me the confidence to do that.
Honestly, no, I didn't. I got very close with a girl who is really interested in activism, and opened my eyes to why activism is really important. I guess I would consider myself an activist. If I had a chance to, I definitely would. But like, I don't have a chance to.
I did a couple events with individuals, yeah, with my mom, but definitely not as frequent as now. So I think I've gone to a higher level.
There's hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on.
Yes, I want to do that throughout my life. Absolutely. Yes, I really want to. Absolutely.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. I think it's drawn a lot of what teenagers can do.
I mean, now that I have like these opportunities, I'm so excited to be an activist.
Okay. So, that was really awesome when I was filming it and also going over it because, I realized, while I was, filming them that I kind of already, answered my question halfway through the process. These kids were, fired up about, different issues and wanted to be involved in activism and wanted to continue with activism after the event. And, so it was just really awesome to see that. Besides that, though, there were some difficulties, throughout this process. There was a lot of struggle in being, an organizer. There's a lot of backlash, a lot of personal attacks, and then there were other students whose personal feelings in politics had to be considered. The administration was also sort of wavering in their support of us. So here's an example of that in that shirt over there. We wanted to hang up signs that didn't have political opinions. It just advertised the free bus trip down, and we were told if we hung up the signs for the march that they'd be taken down immediately. So we kind of had to find some loopholes to get around that. So one of those ideas was, and I spent a whole evening making them and stenciling out shirts, was to just kind of wear our message, and we had to secretly hand out flyers, but the shirt said, "Free bus trip, March for Our Lives in Boston, ask me how." And so there were a group of 30 of us throughout the week who just kind of wore them and handed out signs when we could, advertising this trip. Another thing that was kind of difficult is that we were in a very public position while we were doing this. And so we were constantly speaking with different news agencies, and there was a lot of negative support, which was expected, but so here's one of the nicer messages that someone sent directly to me, but there were also comments on Facebook streams that some of you may have seen, but this was it was on the nicer side. It says, "Wow, you think your protest is really going to make a difference?" Shaking my head. So that's like getting messages like that were kind of unmotivating, not just for me but other students, but we knew we had to continue and we couldn't just give up because people disagree with us and people are going to be mean, and we had to work on how to respond to those people or to just ignore them. So that was difficult. And then another thing that was really difficult with this was time. So during the first month, I was getting messages left and right, 50 to 100 messages and calls a day from different members of the community and news organizations. And I wanted to respond to them because I felt that this was important, but taking the time to respond to that and also balancing that with my personal life was something that I struggled with a lot. Sorry, I'm over on the screen. There we go. Each interview that I gave took in between 10 minutes to an hour. I did about 50 interviews in total. And the shooting happened right before our February break. So I was going down, I was traveling to the Caribbean, and my mom had to stop the car 3 or 4 times on the way to the airport so I would have enough service to talk to different news people. And then also in between plane rides, I was having to call people, and so it was kind of difficult to balance that with what I actually had to be doing. But I was definitely willing to do it. It just wasn't always easy. We also we had over 300 articles published on us, not necessarily all interviews we did, but people would buy them, and then we published the information. But over 300 articles on us, including features in New York Times, NPR, Time Magazine's website, the Boston Globe, BBC, and then also some local Maine things. And then on our trip down to Boston, we also had a reporter embedded with us on the bus ride from New Center, Maine. So because of that, there were all of these struggles. I didn't want to just let them happen. I kind of wanted to learn from them. So I went and I talked to my mentor, and she recommended some things that I could do to kind of improve on what was going wrong during this process. So some of the things that she recommended were to watch a TED Talk or some TED Talks, and also to talk with a woman named Emily Magner from Planned Parenthood, who works in the Action Forum department. So the TED Talks that I watched were what it takes to be a great leader. So that kind of taught me different ways to include people and different ways to make decisions, and you can't please everyone all the time, so that helped give me tips on how to deal with that. Another one that I watched was Activism Needs Introverts, so that helped me find ways to talk to people who aren't necessarily comfortable with being in the spotlight or giving their opinions, because it puts you in a really vulnerable place and it's difficult. So that gave me ways to help keep those people included. I also went on this website called Everyday Feminism, and that helped give me tips on how to combat activist burnout. So it taught me, what burnout, or it gave me tips. And so the first thing was to find what activist burnout looks like for you. So for me, it was, being tired and a little anxious with different things. And then you had to find ways to cope with that. So whether it was a 15-minute walk or nap or yoga or just, that, you also had to find people that you can confide in that could give you, support. And then also it talked about the importance of taking breaks when needed, even if it's, a couple days. And so where to now? Next year, I will be going to the University of Maryland at the School of Public Policy. For me, this activism journey doesn't really end. I believe that once you're involved with activism, it's kind of a lifelong process. While I'm at University of Maryland, I plan on joining 2 clubs. These clubs include Democracy Matters and Girl Up, and they work on getting different students involved with activism and kind of do the same thing that this club, MDIHS Resistance, did. And as far as this club goes, over the summer I'm going to lead some groups, and we're going to meet with some 8th graders and keep planning events with the club. And then next year a group of juniors is going to take over and kind of lead the group. So these are my sources for the project, and I would like to thank Gail Leiser, my mentor, for all of her help and advice and support, and for meeting with me at all times of the day. I'd like to thank Bo Green for giving me advice and recommending Gail and letting us use her room. She let us use her room each morning for the weekly meetings, so that was awesome. I'd like to thank Ms. Lehman, my senior X teacher, for keeping me on track with this project. I'd like to thank Indivisible and FWC for all of their support in this and their advice and money support and setting up GoFundMe so we could go down to Boston. I'd like to thank MDIHS Resistance for letting me be their leader, my mom for all of her help planning different things, Chase for your support, and you guys for coming and watching. Thank you. Am I good?
Well, that was 1959.
I just made it.
You did pretty darn well with that. So, first, let's, if there are any panel members that have questions, this is a great time for that.
I do have a question.
Yep.
I'm just curious what a tip line is.
Okay, so the anonymous tip line is basically a way for students to text in or email their concerns to the administration. And so it sends an automatic, if someone's like, oh, I think this person might be a concern, or they have something with bullying that they want to address, but they don't necessarily want to go and say it themselves. It just sends a text directly to them, and then if it's a more serious concern, it sends it to the police department as well. So that was just kind of something we wanted, because there are people who have concerns, but they're kind of afraid to go and say them out of fear of getting in trouble or something. So that was something we wanted set up. Yep.
So very impressive.
Thank you.
And I've known you a long time, so that's why this question is going to be, what do you think you had brought to the table as a person when you started this journey, and who do you think you are now based on this journey?
Okay, so when I started, I kind of thought oh, I don't need to learn anything. I know what activism is. I've been to marches. And then, I realized that there's a lot of, things that I didn't know. And one of those things I struggled with a lot throughout this was public speaking. I had to give different speeches and kind of boss people around a lot, and so that was kind of a step out of my comfort zone. And the other day I was talking with my mentor, and she gave me a nice compliment. She's like, you're a lot more confident than you were when I met you a few months ago. And so I just feel like this process has really helped me grow as a person and become a better leader, and I don't know, it's just been awesome to work with everyone. So yeah.
Have you learned not to read the comments?
Yes. Well, the problem was with the comments, we didn't want to read them, but some of them we discovered on one of the posts that a couple of them are threatening, so then we felt that it was necessary to go through all of them, and so it wasn't the best, but I don't know.
Have you come up with a way of responding?
Throughout this process, we didn't respond to any comments. We asked community members to support us if they were willing, and just not even respond to them, but just say, "Oh, good job," and "Thank you for what you're doing." But other than that, we just completely ignored them. Yeah.
Some of the rest of us commented.
Yeah.
We had to ride.
The allies.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It seems like the majority of people that went on the trip were like-minded as you. Did you find that you were able to bring on anybody into your group that was not like-minded and really convert them into being more?
I wouldn't say we converted anyone's like thoughts. I think everyone kind of came in with, the same general idea. There were definitely issues, with disagreeing how events should be done, which we kind of had to work with. And there was a student who was in the group, and they weren't, Democrat, and they didn't have like liberal mindsets, but they wanted to be involved and they wanted to give their support. And they haven't come to the past few meetings, but it went well, like while they were in it, and we worked with them to kind of help give them their voice as well. So, yeah.
Any questions from anybody in the audience? Feel free.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the most important thing to know about activism?
That's a difficult question. The most important thing to know about activism? I guess that there's always going to be people who disagree with you, and it's important that you keep using your voice, no matter what, and also to do it respectfully, because, nothing really gets done if you aren't respectful during this. So I just say to stay motivated, be respectful, ignore people if you have to, but to keep fighting.
Anybody else have any questions?
A really fast comment.
Yeah, go.
I think you were incredibly humble about the amount of time you put into all of this. I just want to acknowledge you. I know that you worked so hard on all this. So
Thank you.
I'm really proud of you.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to ask everybody to hit the road. If I don't run into you, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.